All right, well, I better get started. Genesis chapter 41. We're ready for the end of that. It's good to see you this morning. Everybody have a good week? One of those weeks. Yes, breakfast and lunch, yes. Yeah, I was just thinking a while ago, moved to Metro. Lived in Dixon, lived in a suburb, or a subdivision, of Dixon for 19 years, 20 years actually, and had a few animals. We mostly had a yearly turtle, come through the yard, and because we had a little pond there that was there when we got there, and I kept it up, and so we'd have a yearly turtle, and but I moved to Metro. So you're thinking, except for two-legged animals, you'll have no animals in your yard, right? So last night I had coyotes, and this morning I had deer. And so, you move to the city, you get animals. Oh, yeah. Well, the coyotes, no, but the deer, yes. So yeah, it was fun to watch them this morning. It was a mama, and the other one probably was about a year old, maybe a little less, but she was watching it. And it's fascinating. So, yeah, 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 the coyotes, yeah. The coyotes are terrible. But anyway, I knew I had them. I knew they had visited. I hadn't seen their tracks in the yard yesterday. So, but anyway, Psalm 41. No, Psalm 40. Don't turn to Psalm 40. Genesis 41. I'm sorry. Y'all got me confused now. Genesis 41. We can turn to Psalm 41. It's good. It's a great psalm. But we're trying to get through Genesis. It's been a long time. So, I promise never to get into a 50-chapter book. Again, I know of a preacher that did a series on book of Psalms. Now, think about it. He only did it on Sunday night. There's 150 Psalms. And then you've got some that are a little long, require a couple of lessons on it. So if he preaches, say, 50 Sundays out of the year, which you get 2 vacations, well, they have 2 gospel meetings, so 48, but we'll say 50. That's 3 years worth. That would drag on for a little bit long. But anyway, he did it, not me. Yeah, well, usually a series after 13 weeks is too long, and you need to move on to something else. But anyway, we're going to, it's been asked to maybe do a topical study for a little while, and so we're going to do a topical study when we get finished with Genesis. And we'll see. I'm in the process of seeing what all I want to pull in on it and what all I want to take out of it. So I'll tell you, as this week's get closer, I'll tell you. I know what it is. It's just a matter of getting it in. We're going to talk about studying your Bible, how to study your Bible, methods of studying the Bible, things of that nature. And like I said, that may take 13 weeks. But I've done that before, but I want to do the series. So I'll see what I want to pull in, and we'll talk about that later. Because at Genesis 41, we still got 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, another quarter now. We'll see how fast we can move. But in Genesis 41, Pharaoh has had his dream. Remember Joseph, we are in the story of Joseph. Joseph has already, he had interpreted the dream of the butler and the baker. He'd been forgotten, if you will. Pharaoh has his dream, and all of a sudden, Joseph, who had been forgotten, is now remembered, and he's brought in to interpret Pharaoh's dream. Pharaoh's dream was, basically that there's going to be 7 years of fat and there's going to be 7 years of famine. And Joseph, being the man he was, a man of good character and good, evidently, work ethic, Joseph is put in charge. And Joseph is put in charge of gathering all the crops and making sure that there is sufficient to have when the famine hits. And we got down as far as verse 50 in chapter 41. It said, to Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of the famine came, whom Asenath, the daughter of Pharaoh, priest of On, bore to him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh. Manasseh means make to forget. I think that's interesting. He seemingly probably wanted to forget all of the pain that he'd gone through in his life. For he says, for God has made me forget all my toil and all my labor's house, or all my father's house. And the name of the second he called Ephraim. Ephraim literally means double fruit, for God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. So he names his 2 children, if you will. Let me forget the past, but let me consider the blessings of the present and what I've gone through. Then the 7 years of plenty, I want to come back to that thought in just a second. The 7 years of plenty which were in the land of Egypt ended, and the 7 years of famine began to come, as Joseph had said. The famine was in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. It's not a localized famine. It's a famine that is wider in scope and in nature, but in Egypt, because of Joseph, because of his God-given ability to interpret the dream, because of them being able to plan for the future, they have bread. So when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph. Whatever he says to you, do. Joseph is given charge. And it's interesting that Joseph is given complete charge, not just of gathering the grain. Remember, they wanted basically a 1/5 kind of tariff, 1/5 tax. They gathered, they collected, and so not only was he in charge of gathering, because Pharaoh said then, whatever Joseph says, that's what we're going to do. Now all of a sudden, with the disbursement of the goods, whatever Joseph says, that we will do. And so it says that Joseph, verse 56, the last part of it says, Joseph opened all the storehouse and sold to the Egyptians, and the famine became severe in the land of Egypt. So all the countries came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain, because the famine was severe in all the lands. The food program went from a gathering in to a giving out, and it changed, if you will, as we'll see, especially when we get into the 47th chapter. There's a lot of things that opens this story up that we're kind of getting the basic outline for here at the very beginning. But Joseph is a man that we talked a little bit about his nature, his character, what he was and how he was. But I think the first paragraph, I want to backtrack a little bit, verses 51 and 52, when he talks about Manasseh and Ephraim, and talks about naming his children. He wants to forget the past. Well, who doesn't? Let me just forget all the things, all the toil at my father's house, and all the hurtful things that went on in my life. Let me forget. But then he says, let me call the second one Ephraim, because in my affliction, in the land of affliction, God's blessed me. We often spend time in our lives looking at the past and looking at the bad of the past. And, I guess you could say it's human nature. I guess you could say that's just the way we're made up. Look at the things of the past, remember the bad things. And you don't often, we talked about this last week, you don't often remember the good things of the past. We remember the bad things of the past. He wanted to forget these things. Help me forget this. Then he says, I want to name a second child Ephraim. Why? Because I want to remember, I want to understand that God has caused me, even in my affliction, to be fruitful. Even in my troubles, even in my toils, I've been blessed. We often look at our problems as blessings. I was listening to the radio the other day. I've heard this disc jockey make the same statement before, but I thought, that's something I want to remember for Sunday, because it's very true of all of us. And that is, he made the statement, he says, I grow more from my failures, and I've grown more from my failures than I have any of my successes in life. There's a lot of truth to that. Why? Because we learn lessons. Those lessons then help us do what? Have success in the future, right? And so we need those things. We don't like them, but we need those things so that we can have success in the future. And that's sort of, I think, what Joseph is saying. Let me throw at you something. Joseph had to deal with delay. I mean, Joseph's whole life was dealing with delay, dealing with the fact that seemingly, he's loved by his father, but then he's sold by his brothers into slavery. He comes out of that, but then he's thrown into prison. He stays in there for a while, thinks he should be remembered, but he's forgotten. He comes out of that. He ends up Pharaoh's court, serving. But he dealt with a lot of delay in his life. We often deal with delay in our life as well. Let me give you just 4 different things to think about with regards to dealing with delay. Because you may be right now, admittedly, none of us know what's happening in the other person's home. We think we do, but we don't. You may be dealing with delay in your life right now. Here's 4 things that I think will help you. First of all, don't be surprised by delays that you have in your life. We all need patience, don't we? We all need patience. Patience is a virtue, and patience is usually given to the guy that learns to wait, learns to be still, learns to simply not be alarmed at the fact that there are times that you have to wait. Second of all, learn in and during the delay. Each step has a lesson in personal growth. We've already talked about that. Verse 39 of the text kind of gives us that idea here. When you look at verse 39, it says, Pharaoh said to Joseph, inasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. He'd learned in all of that. Be a little patient. We need to learn that lesson as well. We need to learn to wait for God's timing. Look in verse 13. It makes the statement, it came to pass, just as he interpreted for us, so it happened. He restored me to my office, and he hanged him. And, of course, this is the butler talking about the fact that Joseph had interpreted his and had interpreted the baker's dream, and it happened just as he said that it would. Well, think about, you remember, we said he had to wait 2 years for basically Pharaoh to be told who he was. And so he had waited this time. And we have to wait on that timing of God. Wait on God's timing. And then fourthly, we choose how we respond. What's your attitude? I don't get a sense of Joseph's attitude when he gets out as being one that's upset, mad, hurt. Joseph seemingly picks up and just moves right on with life. Now, who likes those empty times in your life? Joseph, I'm sure, didn't like them, but he was able just to simply say, okay, that is what it was, and is what it is, and we're just going to move on. We can't change it. We can't do anything about it. We're just going to put a peg down, and we're going to start here, and we're going to move forward. And that's what he did. And so sometimes if you're dealing with delay in your life and you're wondering, maybe look at the story of Joseph and get some ideas there. Anything anybody like to add, say? All right, well, let's go to chapter 42 then, Genesis. Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt. Jacob said to his sons, why do you look at one another? Don't you like that? There's almost, the vision that I have in my head probably is not true. But I just see Jacob coming through, and there's no food, they're hungry, they know they're hungry, there's nothing left in the cupboard. Maybe it's been that way for a few days, and Jacob walking through and seeing his sons and says, "What are you doing here?" It's almost as if, too, that Jacob is saying, "You fellas, you boys, they're grown now. You should have known that there's nothing going on here, but there is in Egypt, and you should already be on the road. But here I am, I'm the father, I have to tell you everything." Well, fathers have to lead. So, it's just an interesting statement. Why you look at one another. Get up, get going. He said, "Indeed, I've heard that there's grain in Egypt. Go down to that place, buy for us there, that we may live and not die." So Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, "Lest some calamity befall him." The sons of Israel, or Jacob, went to buy grain among those who journeyed, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Benjamin had sort of taken Joseph's place as being his father's favorite. And so Jacob sends, or Israel, as he's referred to in this text both ways, and both is correct, but he sends his boys, but he doesn't send Benjamin. And so Joseph, it says, verse 6, Joseph was governor. We think of governor as being someone over a province. It just seems to me that maybe Joseph is more over a program here, but he's over it. And so he's referred to as the governor over the land, governor over the food program. And it was he who sold to all the people of the land. Well, we picked that up in chapter 41 just a second ago. Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. Does it remind you of something? Remember the dream that Joseph had? Those that bowed down to him. He had told his brothers it had made them angry. Now you see the fulfillment. Years later, but nevertheless, the fulfillment. Joseph saw his brothers, recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly or harshly to them. Then he said to them, "Where do you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan, to buy food." He spoke harshly to them. Notice there's a couple of things in the text that are just, to me, that are fascinating. First of all, Joseph recognized his brothers. So the inclination is, well, why didn't his brothers recognize him? Well, a lot of different things. Dress, position, place. The best story I have for that is not long after I had moved to Dixon. I was in Walmart, walking through, getting a couple of different things. And there was a man in there, and I had been there probably about 3 months. But this man had been in and out. They traveled some, and he had been in and out. And I hadn't seen him a lot. And he walks up to me at Walmart, and he starts talking to me. Well, I'm sorry. I talk to people. And I started talking to him, and finally he looked at me and he said, "You don't know who I am?" And I said, "Nope, have no clue who you are." He said, "Well, I'm so-and-so." And he said, "I go to church with you." And I said, "Yep, you do." And yeah, you are. And he said something, and I said, "Just didn't recognize you." He had a floppy hat on, and I think shorts. And I said, "Hadn't seen you dressed like this before." And so I didn't make the mistake of, I always recognized him then, whether in church or out. But, maybe that was it. Joseph had different clothes on. He'd grown up. He'd matured. He'd also gone through some hard times. He probably looked a little different. They weren't expecting him in that place. They probably thought he probably was dead, or he was a slave, somebody's slave somewhere. He wouldn't have been in a place of position. We don't know why they didn't recognize him, but they didn't recognize him. And then notice that not only did they not recognize him, but in recognizing them, he acted as a stranger. You might say, well, why would he act? Why wouldn't he throw himself at them? Well, I don't know that either. Text really doesn't tell us. I could assume certain things, and that can usually turn out wrong. I could assume that he wanted to see how they were going to react. He wanted to see if they would recognize him. Maybe he wanted to see if they'd matured, if they'd grown up, if they'd changed their behavior. I don't know. I think there are some hints from this point forward, but I don't think there's anything you can just, sort of like Jell-O, you can't nail it to the wall. You just can't say, well, this is why he treated them this way. But he treats them from the standpoint of he acts like a stranger to them. He spoke roughly or harshly to them. Now, I don't know if that means tone or word choice. And there's no way of knowing from the Hebrew whether it means tone or word choice. It just that he spoke roughly to them. And so he asked them, where did they come from? They tell him from the land of Canaan. So Joseph, verse 8, recognized his brothers. They did not recognize him. When Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them and said to them, you're spies. You've come to see the nakedness of the land. The word nakedness means the exposed parts of the land. You're spies. He accuses them. If you stop and think about it, he accuses them of some what would be considered pretty harsh accusations. As he accuses them of this, he knows what's going on, of course. But they said to him, no, my Lord, but your servants have come to buy food. We are all one man's sons. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies. But he said to them, no, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said, your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And in fact, the youngest is with our father, and one is no more. So, they're telling him a little bit about the past. There's 10 of us, basically. The 11th one, if you will, is not here. The 12th one has already passed. Sort of that order. But Joseph said to them, it is as I spoke to you, saying you're spies. He still sticks to his accusation. But think about it. By this accusation, he's getting out of them what he needs to know. He's getting out of them information. And now he knows for sure. He knows for sure that these are his brothers. Their thought, their statement is, their belief is that, as they say, one is no more. Probably their thinking is he's dead. He's dead. And so, as we move forward, it says that in this manner you shall be tested by the life of Pharaoh. You shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother, and you shall be kept in prison, that your words may be tested to see whether there is any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you're spies. So he put them all together in prison 3 days. Was this normal treatment? Don't know. Would he have accused everyone of being a spy? Probably not. You wonder why his brothers didn't catch on? Don't know. A lot of questions. There's really more questions than we have answers. And so don't get upset by the fact, well, I don't get this and I don't get that. You know why? Because God didn't want you to know those things. He's told you what he wants you to know. So just let the story flow as it is. That's theologians often get caught up in things, and there are literally books that are written. And sometimes I get a book and think, okay, this is going to be good, and the first half's good, and the second half, then you begin to say, why are we worried about this? Doesn't matter. Well, we get into this story, and we don't know a lot of things, and so we ask those questions, but we just don't know them, and so don't get upset about it. God says you don't need to know it. Joseph then said to them on the 3rd day, do this and live, for I fear God. If you're an honest man, let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house. But you go and carry grain for the famine of your house. And bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified and you shall not die. Leave one of your brothers here. The thought is what? They'll go home, they'll carry the grain home that they've bought, they'll get to feed everybody be taken care of, and then they'll come back with the youngest brother, as he's being called. They'll come back with the youngest brother to take care of and to get their brother out of prison. Surely they won't leave their brother in prison. Now, there's a calculated risk with that thought, isn't there? If they don't like this brother that they're going to leave any more than they like Joseph, they're not going to come back. I don't care. But he believes that they will. And so he tells them, you come back, you bring your youngest brother with you, you verify that you're not spies, we'll let your brother out. And so they did. They left Simeon behind. Verse 21 says, they said to one another, we're truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear, therefore his distress has come upon us. And so there's a confession there, and there's a confession of their guilt. Well, Reuben then said to them, saying, did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen. Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. But they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. See, he had played this game out well. And he turned himself away from them and wept. Then he returned to them again and talked to them, and he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. He wanted it all above board. Interesting, isn't it? Let's go back and look at a couple of things. Let's go back and look at verse 22. Reuben said, hey, didn't I tell you? Oh, there's always one in the crowd, right? There's always one in the crowd. Didn't I tell you? Yeah, you did, but shut up. No, you can't do that to him. But you want to. Yes, you told us. We always understand, we know about the law of sowing and reaping. Whatever a man sows, that shall also what? Reap. Right. He's going to get that which basically he has put in. It's getting close to growing season, which means some of you will put a garden in, and some of you will put flowers in the ground, and if you put a bean seed, if you will, in the ground, you're going to get a bean. You're not going to get a potato, right? We know that. So the law of sowing and reaping. Reuben says, see, told you. We're reaping now what we've sown. But there's also, in this day and age, the younger people don't call it sowing and reaping because that's too, if you will, it's too old-fashioned for them. They call it karma. Karma is basically the idea, this is oversimplification of karma, but karma is basically the idea of you're going to get back what you put into it. And if you've done something bad, then therefore you're going to get bad. If you've done something good, you're going to get good, or receive, we should say receive, you're going to receive good. Well, whatever you want to call it. Reuben says, see, I told you so. But I think it's interesting. Verse 21, this confession, we're truly guilty concerning our brother. We saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. His distress has come upon us. There's a feeling of remorse and a feeling of guilt. But it's taken all these years for him to get to this point. Sad, isn't it? Sad that it is, but nevertheless, thankful that they do. To come to a point, to an understanding of our failures is not always easy because we don't like to think about our failures. We like to think about our successes, but we don't want to keep going over in our memory, our mind, our failures. But as we said a while ago, our failures really are what we learn from, and we learn the most from. In order for it not to be years and years and years before we fix the problem, if you will, I propose, as the Bible proposes, that we examine ourselves, and we do it quite frequently. That we spend time evaluating what we've done And if we've made a misstep, to straighten that misstep out. It took years. And you might say, well, maybe they knew it beforehand, and maybe they did, but it's interesting that here in the text, they finally admit it. There's a lot more there, but anything anybody like to say? Yeah, I wonder that. Probably so, but you don't know. But yeah. Why didn't they pick the oldest? But they picked Simeon. That's one of those things you just don't know. But he picks him, and the fact that he basically he wanted them. This is assumption on my part, okay? But I believe that he wanted them as they went home to remember the last thing they saw, because that's usually what we do. We remember the last thing that we saw. And the last thing that they saw was what? Simeon being tied, handcuffed, not literally as we think of it today, but handcuffed and dragged off. Joseph wanted them to remember that. And the fact that, like I say, they didn't pick Reuben, they picked Simeon. Strange. And I don't know why, but that is very strange. Anything else? Joseph then, verse 25, gave a command to fill their sacks with grain. Now this is, if you ever want to cause trouble, Joseph knew how to do that. Joseph played this game out really well. You may have been a part of, and I'm not saying originated, hopefully you didn't, but you may have been a part of a revenge scheme. I have. Maybe you have. And when it gets played out and it finally comes out, you go, oh, well, that explains a lot of things that I just didn't, as it was going on, didn't put together. And so the revenge scheme here is just kind of interesting that Joseph did. So Joseph commanded to fill their sacks with grain, but also to restore every man's money to his sack. So not only did they get their grain in their sack, but they got their money. And to give them provisions for the journey. They needed to get home. How were they going to be physically able to get back home? So he gave them provisions for their journey. Thus he did for them. So they loaded their donkeys with grain, departed from there. But as one of them opened his sacks to give his donkey feed at the encampment, he saw his money, and there it was in the mouth of his sack. So all of a sudden they get maybe a day's journey. It's nighttime. Okay, we gather up the animals. We're going to feed them. We're going to take care of them because they have to get at home. They open up the sack, and not only is there grain in the sack, but there's our money. Uh-oh. Well, the first idea probably pops in their head is what? Somebody made a mistake. They should have taken the money out. Maybe they thought other things, but that seemingly because you say they want to carry later on, there's this want to carry the money back, if not by them, at least by Father. But anyway, they open it up. All of a sudden, here's their money. The man who is Lord of the land spoke. Oh, excuse me, I skipped some, didn't I? So verse 28. So said to his brothers, my money has been restored, and there it is in my sack. Then their hearts failed, their hearts sank. The idea within them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, what is this that God has done to us? Now here's that guilt that comes back again. What's God done to us? God's getting even with us. Then they went to Jacob, their father, in the land of Canaan, and told him excuse me, all that had happened to them, saying, the man who is Lord of the land spoke roughly to us, took us up for spies of the country. But we said to him, we're honest men. We're not spies. We're 12 brothers, sons of our fathers. One is no more. The youngest is with our father this day in the land of Canaan. Then the man, the Lord of the country, said to us, by this I will know that you are honest men. Leave but one of your brothers here with me. Take food for the family of the household and be gone. Bring your youngest brother to me, so I shall know that you are not spies, but that you are honest men. I will grant your brother to you, and you may trade in the land. Then it happened as they emptied their sacks that surprisingly each man's bundle of money was in his sacks. And when they saw their and when they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. Jacob, their father, said to them, "You've bereaved me. Joseph is no more. Simeon is no more, and you want to take Benjamin. All these things are against me." So now Jacob is saying, wait a minute, he's probably saying, can't you boys get anything right? Took you out one time, left you out for a while. Joseph ends up gone. Now Simeon's gone because he's in Egyptian prison. And now to get more, and we're going to have to go back, but to get more, guess what? He wants Simeon. Or excuse me, he wants Benjamin. And so, God's really out to get me. Now, well, let's go on. Reuben spoke to his father, saying, "Kill my two sons. If I do not bring him back to you, put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you." This is sort of a vow, if you will, that Reuben makes. Okay, here's what we're going to do. If I don't bring Benjamin back, you take my two sons, and he says, you take them. And you kill them. He says, but if I bring them back, it's different. It's no longer, the vow's no longer valid from the standpoint of it's been fulfilled. And so it's sad to me, the commentary of seemingly the lack of value of human life. Here he is. Here's Reuben, and he's basically saying, here's my two sons for the loss of your two sons. You might say, well, that's the old adage of an eye for an eye. Yeah. But nevertheless, the cheapness, if you will, which they're placing upon family and upon life. Now, I don't know what you could have done, and I really don't know what other vow he could have made. But it's nevertheless Reuben saying, look, I got two boys. You take them, you kill them. Here's the guarantee. Here's kind of the earnest, if you will, the down payment. But he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he's left alone. If any calamity should befall him along the way in which you go, then you would bring down my gray hair with sorrow to the grave. The grief that I would feel. Imagine, if you will, losing a child, and maybe you've been in that position. I hope you haven't, but if you have, the grief, the pain. And so Jacob says, we can't do this. I can't lose another child. I remember many, many years ago, and this was 30 years ago, where I was preaching at the time, the local funeral director called me up one day, and he said, Paul, I've got a family up here. They are or have been through the years connected with the church, but they moved off years ago. Their funeral is here, and the burial will be outside the city, outside the town. And by the way, the funeral director was a member of the church. He said, would you be willing to do the funeral? Sure. Help the family out. I'd be glad to. And I remember Sister Fox. I remember many things about her. But I remember here she was mourning the death of her son, her only child. And we did something at that funeral that I hadn't done before, and I haven't done since, and I don't care to do it again. But we opened up the casket at the cemetery. And Sister Fox wanted to see her son one last time. And there was a slight hill. This was West Tennessee. So not like what we think of around here, but slight hill cemetery where that body was. And she about pulled the casket over on her because she was pretty much in a wheelchair because we rolled her from the car to the burial spot. She about pulled the casket over on her. If the funeral director hadn't been at one end and me at the other, it probably would have tipped over. But I remember her saying, this is not normal. This is not natural. I should have died and he should still be here. Yeah, from a natural standpoint. But the grief that goes with losing a child, years later, is still felt by Jacob. And I can understand why. It's something that could never get rid of. But Jacob says, no, we're not sending Benjamin back. It's not happening. And so the grief that's felt. Anything else? It's just a story. It's a great story, but it's just a story. There's not a lot of just lessons to learn. It is a great story, though, the providence of God, isn't it? Well, we can at least begin chapter 43. The famine was severe in the land, and it came to pass that when they had eaten up the grain which they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, go back, buy us a little food. But Judah spoke to him, saying, the man solemnly warned us, saying, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man has said to us, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. They are pretty adamant. They understand. It's as if Joseph, when he made his point, he really made his point to his brothers. Don't come back unless you bring the youngest one. So, like I say, Joseph had played this game out pretty close to the vest. And he'd made believers of them. And so they're at a quandary. Well, verse 6 says, Israel said, why do you deal so wrongly with me as to tell the man whether you still had another brother? They said, the man asked us pointedly about ourselves and our family, saying, is your father still alive? Have you another brother? And we told him according to these words. Could we possibly have known that he would say, bring your brother down? This was he asked us questions. We told him answers. We told him the truth. We're honest people. After all, that's what they were telling him. That's what they were telling Joseph the whole time, right? We're honest people. And so they're saying, well, why we're honest. Now, it's interesting. You can find out just about anything about anybody in this day and age. You think your identity is covered? It's not. I had a man call me this week from Texas. I forgot now where Texas. I had sent to Power for Today. I'd sent 3, and I think the third one is now published. I've just recently sent 3 more. But I had a little article, a little devotional published this week. This brother was in Texas, or is in Texas, been retired for many years. At one time had a connection to this area because he worked at one of the congregations in Murfreesboro. But anyway, he called me up. And now, if you're not familiar with Powerful Day, it's a very short devotional book, very short daily devotional. It has story, a few little things to apply that. And then it has a prayer. And it has my name, Paul Daugherty, Nashville, Tennessee. He called me on the church phone. He tracked me. Now, did I know that he could? Yes, because I could have done it. And if I can do it on the computer, anybody can do it. But it just shows that and he was very nice, very complimentary of what he had to say about what I had said. And we talked for a while and had a real nice conversation with him. But he tracked me down. Well, they didn't have the internet, but they knew evidently that their dishonesty could be found out. So they were very honest with Joseph. And Jacob is saying, well, why did you have to tell him all this? In many ways, in many places, I'm an open book. In church and teaching and preaching, I'm an open book. I'm not so open when you get me out in public. I don't want everybody to know everything about me. My wife, she's an open book wherever she is. Suzanne, wherever she is. Lord love her. Sometimes we go home and I say, why didn't you tell them that? Well. And I understand because Suzanne, and I married her and I love her to death. And so I wouldn't take anything for her, but if you offer me something, we might can talk. But no, I wouldn't dare. But, that's what is the question, and that's probably where we need to stop is, why are you so open? Why didn't you tell? Why didn't you keep this to yourself? And they didn't, and probably should have. Anything anybody wants to ask or say? Do I know? I don't know that I know. Well, I didn't mean that. Yeah, it's more of a rhetorical statement. I don't know that I know because I don't know that that it's said in the text. I don't recall it being said in the text. I'm sure, and I'll try to remember to look that up because I'm sure some theologian has it figured out, but I don't recall it being in the text, so I don't really know. It's a good question. It is one of those questions I've wondered how long was it in between all the boys and from beginning to end. Anything else? Well, all right. Well, okay. Well, we bombed. Let's have a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for this day, for the many blessings, for the opportunity to be together, the opportunity to see your word, for the beautiful sunshine. We're thankful that you love us and watch over us. Thankful for this wonderful story of Joseph. For while there are many lessons and many applications that can be made, we really do see your providence and how things work out, but how it takes time and takes sometimes suffering and pain and anguish and heartache and hurt. May we ever remember those things in our life, that even though we go through those things, that your hand is constantly at work and you're working all things for good for us. Watch over us now, be with us, bless us, and keep us, and hold us as we hold to you. For this is our prayer in Christ's name. Amen. Have a great week. Thank you.